All right, man. So what are we talking about today?
Well, we on the last episode we touched on this like just briefly, but it's kind of like
Okay.
it's a revelation I've been having lately.
Mm,
I think comedians are some of the best digital marketers. Like I think,
mm,
and the reason I think this idea kind of came to my head maybe a week or so ago. I was at the gym and I was listening to Joe Rogan and Bert Kreischer. He's the machine guy. I don't know if you're familiar
yes,
with him. He's the
I'm
guy that takes
familiar.
for the listeners if you don't.
I was
know
trying
who
to
he is,
explain
keep
who he
off.
was to some family the other day, and like it's really hard. Like you start talking about it, and you're like, yeah, he does stand up with no shirt on, and his beer gut hanging out, and he became famous. Yeah, he became famous for robbing a train with the Russian mafia.
Yeah.
It's like this weird.
Well,
It's
and
kind of a weird topic.
I've heard podcasts like I've heard people talk about him. I think Tom Segura was talking about him, and he's like that story, that machine story. He's got like 20 different variations. Like he has a ton of different variations on the story
sure.
that he can tell, and depending on what night how the crowd's reacting to certain things in the audience, like he'll take
He can lean into
with
different pieces of it. That's interesting.
Yeah, but I think Joe Rogan's the one that told him to tell that story more, and then he started blowing up. Like it's kind of a weird thing listening to Joe and him. But they were talking about like social though. What were you saying?
Well, I was just gonna say this is like a really interesting thing that I've learned is like when you have something hit, like when you have a piece of content that hits, like double down.
Oh yeah.
Like in that like if it's on YouTube or a blog, like write more stuff around that, record more stuff around that.
Yeah.
It's on TikTok, make it again, post the same video again. Like you can post this, you can post the same thing. And like, once you have something work, like that's kind of the thing with growth, like, especially on TikTok is like something works. You just keep doing it over and over and over, and it drives your growth while you try other things.
Yeah.
So like, I think there's something to that. Like, oh, hey, you have this thing that's working really well, like double down on it, keep doing it, use that to build because it works and it's going to work with everyone. And then while you're finding the other stuff.
Well, then you can like layer on top of it, which it seems like that's what Bert did. I didn't know his comedy at all before the machine thing, either. But I remember seeing the machine thing and going like, that's really funny. Why does this guy not have a shirt on? But he's
I still couldn't tell you why he doesn't have a shirt on. I don't remember.
Think it just makes him stand out. Like, I think you got to be known for something, especially in the comedian world, but like they were talking about social though. They were talking about Theo Von, and it was just interesting. Mm-hmm. It was them just talking about, like Bert was like, man, Theo is in my feed constantly. He was like, he's like working the algorithm. Like, and you heard them go from like comedians to like the digital marketer that's really behind the comedian. It's like, or just the marketer in general. And it's like, these guys they are sitting there and thinking about how they can go viral on different platforms and how they can grow their subscribers and what kind of content is going to work and not work and how they can take their podcast clips and turn it into. So it's just like, really, it's like the same thing that we do, but that like, they're just doing it really, really well. Like I see more, and part of this is because my algorithms are like tuned in for comedian stuff. But if you think about the reach that Joe Rogan has on his podcast, and then like Theo Von or Bert Kreischer or Tom Segura, like these guys have massive podcasts. They have massive social media followings. They make tons and tons of money.
There's a guy, and I don't know his name, but I know he's got a podcast. And it's another comedian, and he's been crushing it. I want to say Adam something.
What does he look like?
He's got like a mustache, like a skinnier guy.
Nick something.
Oh, maybe.
I can tell you probably who it is.
Like I'm like, I know I saw a video with him recently.
Yeah.
So I'm just like scrolling. Here we go. What is his name? What is this guy's name? Oh my gosh. Oh gosh. Come on. Andrew Schultz.
Oh, Schultz. Yeah. Schultz.
Because like he does it and he's got the crew, right? In another genre, you've got in the sports world, like one of the fastest growing podcasts out there right now in sports is oh gosh, where's my brain today? Now I'm losing him. The punter from the Colts.
Oh God. Yep. I know who you're talking about. Used to be a Barstool.
Yeah.
Barstool.
Oh my gosh. McAfee, Pat McAfee, man.
McAfee.
And he's just got the boys. Like they got that, those guys got it down. And I think why comedians got it so figured out is because when you think about it, Like they know how to write hooks. They know how to figure
Yeah.
out what's working and what's not. It's really interesting. I watched a Joe Rogan interview the other day where he was talking, maybe it was the Andrew Schultz one, where they were talking about his new comedy club. And and basically they were talking about how material evolves and how they do it.
That's
And
fascinating.
there was a discussion about like somebody I know what it was about. Woody Harrelson did the SNL skit. I don't know if you saw it.
Mhm.
And
I saw it.
and it was like talking about it. And he was talking about how like the difference between doing a monologue and stand up is like a monologue. It's like you have a short amount of time, you're putting it out there, like it's got to hit. Whereas like stand up, you might start with that, but then it grows and it develops, and it might take them 6 months of doing shows to get it dialed in to where it's like, this is what it is. And there's so much of like, did this work? That didn't work. How can I connect these pieces? And like, that's digital marketing, right? Like that's what worked. I need to do more of it. Testing hooks. Like you can do the same video over and over and over with different hooks and different titles. So they've got the skill already developed.
It's an amazing thing. Like I watched that episode too, but I never realized. I haven't been to a ton of comedy shows in my life. I've probably been to 4,
maybe been to 2 or 3.
But I just in the first 3, I wasn't aware of comedy at all. But once I've started listening to these comedians do their podcasts and like they talk about being a comedian and all that. I went to one in Vegas. Went to the Laugh Factory. It's at the Tropicana in Vegas, and it was it wasn't like there weren't any like huge headliners there, but they had like 3 comics went. But I realized like, oh, they're working on stuff. Like because it didn't seem very polished. And I guess like as a crowd member in the past, I would have just been like, oh, they're not very good. But I realized like, oh, they're actually just working on jokes and seeing if the delivery on this, what they're trying is going to work better than another one. It's like, I never realized that, but it is just testing. Like the same thing we do. It's just, you're just testing stuff and seeing what works. And once you kind of mold it, then you go, okay, now I've got a bit that I can do.
Yeah. And it was interesting that, talking about like the mothership, like he's got 2 rooms. He's got a big room and it's Big Boy and what's the other nuclear bomb? It's Big Boy and Little something or other.
I didn't realize that's what he called him.
Yeah. And so the reason he does that, I don't know. I don't remember. It's like Big Boy and Little Man or something. I'm totally getting this wrong, but he named him that because the UFO culture is that like UFO sightings exploded after the nuclear bomb. Yeah. And so like, it's like, hey, we dropped these bombs. It got attention.
And then they got their attention.
and his thing's called the mothership. So he has the big room and then he's got the little room. But they were talking
about Batman and Little Boy.
Fat Man and Little Boy. That's what it was.
That's funny.
Yeah. So that's the name of the rooms. But they were talking about like the little room is like, that's where you really learn and you figure stuff out because it's expected when you're in the big stadium. You're expected, like it's on point, it's developed when you do your special. But when you're in the little room, it's understood that like you're talking to hecklers and you're rolling with it and that you're throwing ideas out. And so it's okay if stuff doesn't land. And so that's like really a good place for development. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, when I went to the Vegas one, it was like, I can't remember the comic, what her name was. I'll look it up. But she came out and she just did it. It was all improv and it was really interesting. It was like all she did. It was so like skillful. Like she was just going around the room and she would ask somebody, what do you do for a living? And then they would say something and she would work off that. And then she would work off the reaction from somebody else in the crowd. And then she would like build this bit that happened. And then she could recall, like the recall thing that they do is pretty cool. When you get a comedian that's really good at that, where it's like they can go back 15 minutes and remember what somebody said and tie it into a joke that they have. Yeah. But it was like, I just saw it and I was like, she's just practicing. Like it's really interesting. Sorry, my kid just ran in here.
Oh, that happens. Bring him on. What's up? Okay. It looks like something's going on.
You don't want him on right now.
we'll just yeah, we can just clip that part. It's all good.
It just came in and was like, hey, Daddy.
Dude, I've had that. We had the same thing with when I was with Marco. Paige came in and was like, it's just me and her right now. Like, Come on, girl. Let's ride. Let's see. Show us your Polly Pocket.
Yeah, but so to go back to it was just really like, I don't know, it was just really interesting. It's such an interesting skill set that comedians have.
Yeah.
But then it's like you layer on, it's like they, like everybody else, like every business, like they have to be good at marketing themselves. And like some of these guys are and girls are so good at it. Like, and I think that a lot of it too is probably because of Joe Rogan, because like if Joe Rogan comes on your podcast, because like the guy you were just talking about with the mustache, what's his name again? Andrew Schultz. Yeah. Like Joe Rogan flew out. He talked about it on his own podcast. He was like, man, Joe flew out and like flew his whole family out. He's like, it probably cost him like 50 grand, which is nothing for him, but like probably cost him like 50 grand to like come out and be on my show. But like, then you think about the impact that it has. So he's just going around and like pollinating these other shows kind of with his audience.
Yeah. But I've heard Joe talk about him too, where like Schultz gets a lot of credit for transforming comedy during COVID. So like when they would talk about it, so it's like he had already was going, but one of the things they were talking about is it's so different. There's no energy when you're doing it in this format. Right. And they were like, he did good at figuring out like how to do punchy clips and how to do his comedy in YouTube short format and in podcast format. And so like he already like he adapted to that. And sure, Joe Goen obviously helped a ton, but it was also like he had figured that out first, so that's it's interesting, man. Like I've actually thought about this because you and I were having a conversation. Oh, this was like in the Twitter thing, like last episode. And you were talking about like, I'm just not funny enough, like for tweets. Right. And I was thinking back and I was like, man, I have a hard time, like not just being serious when I'm recording a YouTube video and stuff. Like I get into business, I get into like robot mic mode, I'm just educating, but then it's like, you go to like our coaching calls and it's not that at all. And it's funny and it's like loose. And I'm like, how do you bring that in? Like, I don't know how to bring that in. Like I know how to do the off the cuff. But I've thought about that, man. I've thought about, it's funny that you brought that up because I mean, even this week I've thought about like, man, it'd be interesting to take like a comedy class and like, not because I want to be a comedian, not because I want to be on stage, but just to be able to see how they come up with hooks and how they find those ideas and like pull that into your content just to be like a better content creator, because this is the way things are going, man. Like, I mean, you're completely overhauling your business to be more of a media company and have more video and things like, and it's because this is where the world is going. This is where our businesses are going. And you don't want to get left behind.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's where it's going. It's so much harder. I feel, well, I don't know. I'm just saying that because I came up in you just wrote stuff and published it. Yeah. And it's so funny, man. I used to have like, man, I didn't even know what I was doing when I first started. I was just publishing stuff, but like that worked at some level. I was able to build something off of it, but like, yeah, I mean, I do think that, having the podcast you can clip up and then, like even Theo Von is really interesting because he just sits there and talks. Like he just does it. He has an interview one, but he has like another one where he just, if you're like, I don't know how familiar you are with Theo, but like, he just says random stuff, but it's like very clippable. Like he just tells these stories that are clearly made up, but they're so ridiculous that you can like clip them into something and then it goes viral because they're just so crazy.
I think there's a skill to being clippable too, though. Like, we haven't really figured this out yet, but I'm starting to become more aware of it. Like when we were going through and we were talking about Twitter and I had on the phone, like the conversation that was going through my head was like, okay, I need to get through these and put them out there because like, this is a clip. Right.
Right.
And so now I'm sure Hudson can go in there and he can take some of the little pauses and the things out and make it more into a clip. But it was like, you can talk in a certain way to where they can pull pieces or it's easier to edit.
Yeah.
But you got to learn that. I think comedians have that already. Like they have that timing down.
I think the good ones. Yeah. Cause there was a big difference, but even the last comedy show I went to, like the opening guy and the second guy, and then the lady that came on after, like they were 3 different levels of funny. Like, so there's, maybe it's experience, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it's just,
well, that's why you are where you are. Right. Like you're the headliner. If you're the opener, like you're trying to get there. You've gotten good enough to be that guy's opener. Now you got to learn. And that's how you learn though. Right. I'm sure you're learning while you're on that tour.
Yeah. Yeah. They're just really good, man. Tom Segura is awesome. Like he's got he's got multiple podcasts. He's got the one with his wife, which crushes. And then he's got the 2 Bears, 1 Cave with with Bert. And it's like they just that little circle of, maybe it's not that little anymore, but man,
Dude,
there's
his wife,
so
his
much
wife
reach.
is hilarious.
Oh, he's super fun. I don't know which one of them
he
is
is
funny.
too.
They're both super funny.
They're different. I've noticed like he seems so serious on the podcast when I see it compared to then you watch his comedy. And like if you see his podcast and then go watch his comedy, you're almost shocked. Like because it seems it's almost like it's such a different vibe. But his wife's comedy is funny. I didn't know they were married at first. And then when I found out they were married, I'm like, okay, this is really great because they're making fun of each other in their material.
Oh, 100%. He does. I love that he does it. Like he's a good example of somebody that went from like, they were talking about, I think Joe was talking about at some point. He's like 12 years ago, that guy was broke, like flat broke. And now he's like balling out of his mind, buying cars and all sorts of stuff. He wears Gucci shoes. But like when Tom talks now, oh man, I can just run it. He's fast. Hey, buddy. I got to get a lock on my door. Mike is he's faster than Coral right now because she's hobbled with that injury. Hobbled. Yeah, and he knows he's faster than her. It's really, it's funny, but I can tell she's like really frustrated by it because he's he knows he can run, and she can't catch him. But anyway, Tom, like it's funny, like he starts stuff now. He's like, let me give you some. He's like, let me give the poors some advice. He's like, you guys need to dress better. Like all you need to do, like if you're a poor, if you want to not look like a poor anymore, you just go to a tailor, like just get your clothes done. But it's just funny. Like he's got such an interesting comedy style, but he also was just completely broke not too long ago. And now he's just has so much money coming in.
Well, but isn't that how all of it is? Right. Like
you
grind true. And you do this thing and like,
unless you grow up rich,
one day unless what?
Unless you just, you're just born into money.
Oh yeah. But I'm just saying, like, if you're starting something, like if you're in comedy or business or whatever, like there's just this time that it takes, and then it just clicks. Like I was having this conversation with a client yesterday, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, look, you're struggling with this one thing right now that every single person I've ever worked with struggles with. And what happens is that as soon as they figure it out, they see this immediate jump in income. It feels like overnight. They go from making a sale a week to making a sale a day in the course of a month, because one day something clicks, they've solved that one piece and it unlocks everything. And I think that like that's like just true in a lot of things. Like you just keep doing it until something happens. You don't know what the thing is going to be, but you just have to produce and you have to keep showing up and just like not give up. But I think that's true. There's a lot of that with these comedians and stuff.
Yeah, it was just an interesting parallel. It's like but they're doing it really well. They're doing it better than a lot of digital marketers are doing it, just because they're so prolific. They've got the skill. Yeah. I think you're right, man. I think it's the hook and the storytelling and all of that, and then they just are good at going. I mean, they're good at being in front of people, so they're good at being on camera. Mm-hmm. So then they can just jump on a podcast and riff or
and it's entertaining.
Interesting guests. It's funny.
Like it's one of those things like you have to learn how to be entertaining, like in your content, and that's, man,
they collaborate,
Yeah. But there's something too, like you just got to be yourself. Like, I think this is like the hardest thing that people don't realize. Like you're entertaining and you're weird. Like be weird. Be your weird.
That is tough.
Like if you just show up like the way you actually are, there's other people that are like that. And there's people that are going to like really vibe with you. And they're really gonna be like, oh man, I can relate. Like I really feel, that person's experience like that, I get that, because that's so much of it, man. Like that's like when I was talking to a guy yesterday and he's like, I've been trying to niche down for like the last 6 months. I'm like, what do you mean you've been trying to niche down for 6 months? Like, what's the problem you solve? And then like, go be you. Like you're your niche. Like, and it's so much, life's so much easier, especially with you're doing content, if it's like you're sharing your experience and where you are on the journey. Like when you're giving advice to yourself in the past that helped you get to where you are, and then you're giving tips to yourself on like the things you need to do to get to where you want to go, right? Like that you're dealing with. Cause like a lot of times, like if that's what you do, you're going to be successful, and other people are going to have those same problems, and they're going to be in your shoes, or they're going to be a couple of steps behind you, and they're going to like your personality. Like, so then it's just like what's the problem you solve, and like infuse your other interests into it, like in who you are.
Yeah, I do. I agree with that. I think that that's one of the good things that's happening with the amount of media options available to all of us. Like, I think people just sniff out like bullshit a lot more than they used to. Because even in the personal finance space that I'm in, it's like, you look at like I don't know, some of the personal finance people, man, are just so fake. And it's like an act, and it's like, you feel like you have to be this expert. But some of the people that are crushing now that are just like destroying on TikTok or, whatever, like they're just being themselves and just talking and saying whatever comes to mind. Like they're just being themselves. And I think people like that a lot more now. And it makes like the older style of like being the personal finance expert. I think it kind of makes it stands out,
Yeah. Yeah. I saw a thing yesterday. This is so funny that we were talking about. I think I went on Twitter yesterday after seeing that algorithm thing, and I heard about the dog thing, and I wanted to, or Doge. I think it's Doge. Yeah. So I was like, I want to like see this. And then, I scrolled for a little bit, and it's funny. One of the things I saw was a guy that was like, if you're a productivity expert, sorry, this is so funny. He was like, if you're a productivity expert on Twitter, there should be a second verification where you either have a K or no K, or an NK or a K for kids or no kids. He goes, let's be real. If you're 20 in your 20s and you're a productivity expert, like your shit ain't relevant to most of the population. Like it's a totally different animal.
I wish I didn't feel that way, but like the further into parenthood I get, the harder it is for me to watch somebody give advice on what you should do with anything, like with your money or your time or your business. It's really hard to watch somebody talk about that when they don't have a kid. Like, it's just not that they're not experts and there's an audience for them and all of that, but man, it's so much different. Like when you have a 2-year-old or you have a 4-year-old, you have an 8-year-old, like none of the stuff applies the same way. It just doesn't. And if you have 3 of them, like I've got one.
Dude,
if you have
Katie
3
and
of
I,
them,
Cooper turns 8 in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We're trying to plan a birthday party for him. We probably aren't going to be able to celebrate his birthday, like do a party for him, until almost a month after his birthday, because he's got baseball and there's already things going on. And so we're trying to figure out when you can do it. And it's just like, it's different, man. So anyway, I just thought that was so funny because it's true. It's so true.
It's so true, dude. I mean, like a productivity expert, like they're like, if somebody's telling me like, you got to wake up and you got to journal, you got to meditate. Like a couple weeks ago, I woke up and I woke my son up and he got pissed off because he had to sit on the potty, and he looked at me and he pimp slapped me in the head. Like he just right on the side of my bald head, just And it's like, how do you start your day? Like, I don't want to hear any productivity expert. It's like, how do you recover from that and go into meetings?
Dude,
it's just like, I don't want to hear
that's my problem with Gary Vee, and that's my problem with Alex Hormozy. Is like Alex is, I mean, he's even got a video that's like, if you're having babies, you're dumb. Like, and dude, it's like, you can't reach your goal. I'm like, shut up. And then, I don't know what Gary Vee's lifestyle was, but yeah.
Alex has said, the other thing that I saw from him that I was like, that is a ridiculous take. It was something about like marrying somebody, basically like I could replace, I don't want to butcher this, but it was something along the lines of like, why would you have a wife that's a stay-at-home mom when you could just hire somebody and pay them $50,000 a year to do that instead? And it's like, just the idea of just like your wife shouldn't stay at home and work because you can just
talking about something that you have no experience with.
No idea. And it's like some women, not a lot of women don't like to stay at home because there's a lot of reasons to not want to stay at home. But the ones that do, it's not like, they're not just a person you can replace. I guess you could hire a nanny for $50,000 a year, but it's not about that. It's a take that a person that doesn't have a kid would say though, because they don't realize like, oh, they want to actually spend time with the kid. And like they want to bond and they want to like shape.
I don't even know if he means it or not. I don't know, but like, you never know.
But you just see stuff like that and you're like, oh God, you don't even know what you're talking about.
I never thought Katie was going to be a stay-at-home mom. I never thought I was going to be a stay-at-home dad. Let's be real. Like I didn't think I was
Right,
going to
yeah.
do that. That's just where my life took me. But I didn't think she was going to be a stay-at-home mom. I didn't think she would ever leave Coca-Cola. It was her dream job. She was running a plant. Like
Yeah.
she was crushing it. She was like one of the youngest, people to run a plant in the country. And she loved what she did. She loved the people and she loved being there. But she just got to a point where she was just like, I want to be with my kids. Like, I want to have another, I wanted to have a third kid. And she was like, and then she got one day, she was like, if I leave, can we have another one? So like, I can be the stay-at-home parent. It's like, yeah,
Right.
hell yeah. Like you just never know until you have them. And then you just start, it's the same thing with the business stuff, man. I've told you, with things where I'm like, man, I want to be, I don't want to miss certain things. Like I want to go do certain things. Like I'm sitting here like, next week, Mason's got a preschool field trip to the strawberry farm down the road. And like, we've been there 100 times. And so like, I'm like, well, I got stuff going on that day. And then the other part of me, and I'm like, we've been there 1,000 times. The other part of me is like, yeah, but I went to my kid's field trip and like, that'll mean something to him,
Yeah.
like
he's
like, cause I'm, I've coached Cooper's team and I'm helping his team this year. And he's like, when are you going to coach my team? You can coach my baseball team. I'm like, I got you, bro. When you're not in T-ball, I got you.
Yeah.
It's I can't do T-ball. Can't herd cats all day.
Yeah.
But no, so it's just like,
not to hate on people that don't have kids. Yeah. Not to hate on people because, I didn't have a kid until I was 32, but man, God, you don't know what you're talking about. In terms of productivity and all that kind of stuff, like I've
got awesome friends that don't have kids. And I have some friends that probably may never have kids.
Me too.
Like they're just not interested. I still love them. And you know what? It's funny is like some of my friends that don't have kids or don't want to have kids are like amazing with kids. Like they're my kids' favorite people in the world. So like, that's not a big deal. It's just, I just think it's funny. Like, hey, if you're giving this advice, like there should be, it's like, and that could really go to anything like content advice. Is this like an NK or a K badge? Like which one do you get? Which badge do you get?
Yeah.
Because it matters. It impacts things in such a huge way.
It should be like an asterisk next to it. And then I've also, just to kind of wrap up, like I've heard people that give that advice, say like, oh, if you're a parent, like you're just making an excuse. Like, you just don't want to work hard enough. It's like, I don't know if I would do this, but
well, there's a line there, I think.
Like, okay, do you want to take my kid for a day and try to run your company? Like, let's see, like, let's see how easy it is, or, how much of an excuse it is. Like, it's hard.
Yeah,
it's definitely hard,
man. I might actually be a difference of opinion with you there because, like, to me, I think people use their kids as an excuse.
People do, but I'm
so I think there's a line.
People that don't have kids, like, yeah, there is a line, and it's like, I've just seen
you're saying people with kids saying like, oh, do you really want this? And it's like, you don't understand.
Yeah,
is that what you're saying? Yeah. I 100% get you on that.
Yeah,
100% get you on that. But I think is like somebody that like has kids, like you can. We work with people all the time, and it's like. You can work with somebody and they're like, oh, I got this going on with my kid. And so I can't do it.
Yeah.
What do you mean you can't do it?
No, it's just harder. You could still, if you're a parent, you could still do all the things you want to do. It's just, it is harder.
Sure.
Like
it is
that doesn't matter.
Your timeline might be different. This is a big thing. I don't think people realize like your timeline might be different.
Yeah.
You
can't say I can't make it because of this. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, but it might take longer. It might take a little more sacrifice. It's 100%.
Yeah.
And I think everybody's experienced this. Like you have kids and you're trying to like, there's a reason that like when people become parents, they start to, just kind of pack it on a little bit. It's hard. It's harder.
Yeah.
You gotta manage that. You gotta figure that out. You gotta turn down those wonderfully tasty Uncrustables.
I don't have those yet. Thank goodness
for you.
Well, that's all I got.
That was good. All right, guys. Thanks for the show. Subscribe. See you next week.